Look, I can help you, but promise me you won't freak out.
Why would I trust you?
Promise!
I promise!
Even when you see the horn?
Horn!
Promise!
I promise, I will not freak! Oh.
This is the part where you run.
Blue Sky Studios is dead. So it's been about 2 years since its death. Disney stated it just didn't have the money to keep it afloat during the pandemic, but honestly, I think it was more the fact that they already had multiple animation studios and they didn't want to bother with an old competitor, which was awful for everyone who worked there and was suddenly laid off. But I'll be perfectly honest with you, Blue Sky wasn't the best studio around. Throughout its lifetime, the films that they made were either just good or just bad. None of their films were either bottom-of-the-barrel garbage like Marmaduke or A Troll in Central Park, nor were their films amazing accomplishments like The Last Wish or Encanto. They just existed, did their own thing, and that's about it. Their best film was either the first Ice Age movie, the Peanuts movie, or that Pigeon movie that Will Smith was in. I don't know, I didn't watch that one. I heard it's good, I just don't care. So honestly, I didn't feel all that upset over the studio's closure. It was more for the hard-working animators who lost their jobs unfairly that I felt sorry for. But by the end of the day, they would find new jobs with other studios. Maybe Sony or DreamWorks or hell, even Disney would take some of them aboard. But as for their final movie, it was gone, never to see the light of day as Disney canceled it following the closure. Or so we thought.
I thought you were dead.
My death was greatly exaggerated. So, you're the punk I've heard about.
Nimona is a very unique situation that we often never see. Usually when a movie's canceled, then we're just kind of forced to accept it and move on. Like, whatever, there'll be other movies out there we can watch, and besides, it's based on a popular webcomic, surely it'll get adapted eventually, so whatever. What made it even worse though was why the movie was canceled. You probably already know the story, but I'll break it down just in case you're new to it. So, Disney is rather notorious for having anti-gay policies. Just call it as it is. Usually they go above and beyond to scrub any movie they have clean of any form of that representation. Usually when one of their movies does have a gay character, it's either a background character who's in the movie for like 10 seconds and can easily be removed from Russian and Chinese releases, or B, a blatantly offensive stereotype. Cough, LeFou, cough. Hell, they even removed Li Shang from the live-action remake of Mulan because they were afraid of the internet memes that made him into a bi icon. The fucking idiots at Disney actually looked at memes on the internet which were made for fun and was genuinely worried about what China would think about them. The sheer level of disconnect between executives and the public is only outmatched by Sony re-releasing Morbius in the theaters after memes made them think that people unironically liked it, which was hilarious. We were all busy that weekend. Re-release it again. We'll go see it this time, I promise. But to give credit where it's due, Disney has been getting better with this kind of representation in recent years. The Baymax TV series on Disney Plus last year featured a gay character in one of its stories, and even had a trans character in the background of another one. Strange World was actually the first animated Disney movie to feature one of the main characters as gay. Sure, it didn't affect the plot or anything, but still, the kid was gay. They talked about it pretty casually, and he ends up with a boyfriend in the end. So, you know, good for that movie. It's still a bad movie, of course, but hey, you take what you can get, I guess. And of course, there is the Owl House. If anything was pioneering LGBTQ representation at Disney, it was that show. And it's also why it was dramatically cut short, but my point still stands. Can you name another Disney series where the main character is not only bisexual, but also ends up in a relationship with a lesbian, and even has a scene of her coming out to her mother? It's pretty groundbreaking stuff. The crew of Owl House definitely said fuck it in that final season. We're gonna be gay as fuck, Disney, and you can't stop us. I mean, what are you gonna do? Cancel us twice? There was that 4-second scene that everyone and the grandmothers flipped out over in Lightyear. Apparently Elemental had a non-binary character in it. I don't remember them. Movie to fuck all to show them off. I know there's a bunch of other examples, but I'm not gonna sit here and list every last one of them off. You know what they are. When I say that Disney's getting better, it's definitely with air quotes around it, because even though it is better than it was a few years ago, it still feels rather devoid of any actual passion, save for the Owl House. It feels more like it's being done for a checklist rather than wanting to actually tell gay stories. The representation always felt a bit phony, like they were just throwing it in there to make people happy, but nothing else. It felt like the lazy route, and people reacted like it was the lazy route. Members of the LGBTQ thought the representation was too little, and conservatives thought the representation was too much. I mean, that 4-second scene in Lightyear, they shat the fucking bed like Amber Heard over that. Do I even need to go into the rabbit hole that is Ron DeFascist and Florida as a whole? That shit is an utter nightmare. I want to stop. My point is, it's all over the place for Disney and gay representation. Do I think they're getting better with it? Yes-ish. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and a lot that needs to be made up for. And Nimona is definitely a good example of that. Nimona is gay as fuck. I'm just gonna come out and say it. This movie is fucking gay. It's super gay. If you hated that 4-second scene from Lightyear, then you are not mentally prepared for Nimona at all. This isn't like Disney, who pussyfoots around the issue and crams it into the background. The main character, Ballister, is gay. He's in a relationship with one of the main characters who is a man, and their relationship is actually one of the central focuses of the entire film. No pulling punches, no allegories, they're gay, and this movie is blatant about it.
They seem to be very good friends.
Blue Sky always intended for this movie to be honest about its LGBTQ themes from day one. The original book, created by Nate Stevenson, featured these themes prominently as well, and they wanted to respect that. But then Disney bought Fox, which included Blue Sky, and it was all downhill from there. From that moment, the executives at Disney kept demanding changes. Oh, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. Maybe just stick with a peck on the cheek rather than a full-blown kiss, okay? Apparently, the straw that broke the camel's back was the scene where Ambrosius tells Ballister, "I love you," and Disney drew the line saying that could not happen.
Why can't you just leave me alone?
Because I love you.
Step back, I think I'm gonna vomit!
And I think by that point, the curtains were pretty much closed for Blue Sky, and Disney didn't really worry about it anymore because they knew they were just gonna kill it anyway. I can only imagine how half-assed this movie would have been like had Disney kept it alive and made it in their own image. And given how this movie is overall a huge allegory for LGBTQ in general, it really would have made the film insanely hypocritical and damaged the message of the overall product. I don't think Disney could have released this movie even without any compromises, because due to Disney's business practices in general, the movie would have gotten ripped apart on that merit alone. Blue Sky actually seemed like the perfect people for this movie, because for better or for worse, nobody really had high expectations from them. Nobody would have thought that Blue Sky, of all people, would have made a movie this groundbreaking and ambitious, so as a result, no one would try to stop them. Nobody was taking them as seriously anymore as Sony or DreamWorks or hell, even Illumination, so why not take a risk? Why not go all out? I mean, after all, what do we got to lose?
There you go.
Beat his ass! Beat his ass! Come here, bitch!
Blue Sky is dead, and for a while, everyone thought Nimona was as well, until Annapurna and Netflix announced that they bought the film and they were gonna finish it. The movie was said to be about 75% finished at the time of its cancellation. So, if anything, I think Annapurna just saw this as an easy win. Most of the hard work's already been done, so just get 2 of the people who were working on the film to direct it and release it to Netflix. Fans of Blue Sky are happy, and we make money. Cha-ching. Okay, maybe that's a cynical way to look at it, but it is a business at the end of the day. You know how it is. Either way, though, everyone was happy with the announcement. The authors of the book, the cast, but now the question is, after everything this movie went through, after all of the trials and tribulations, after literally dying and then being brought back to life, was it all worth it in the end? Is Nimona even good? Yes. Yes, it is. Nimona is a unique phenomenon that we don't normally see. Normally when a movie faces a mountain of production troubles, it's lucky to come out as just watchable. This might just be because most of the film was already done, and the directors were smart enough not to pull a good dinosaur and just start from the ground up and redo the whole thing all over again, but it's genuinely incredible that not only did the movie come out as good as it did, but the fact that the movie is actually pretty damn great. It has a few small issues here and there, like any good movie, but despite all that, I'm genuinely surprised. Even though I was curious to see how this movie turned out after everything it went through, a part of me was worried it might not have been worth all of the trouble in the end after all. And again, this is a Blue Sky film we're talking about here, and yes, in spirit, it is. It's their final film, and I'm treating it as such. I'm pretty sure everyone else will, though. As I said earlier in this video, Blue Sky didn't have the most illustrious reputation. Their films often averaged in the okay territory, with the occasional good and bad movie, but nothing spectacular in either direction. But damn, did Blue Sky actually do it? They managed to make a movie that actually surpassed a 7 out of 10. And again, considering all of the production trouble, that is an incredible miracle. It's almost like all of the production troubles somehow hardened the film into a diamond in the rough. And given all the trouble it went through just to exist, we can appreciate its strengths all the more. Sadly though, this makes all the problems stand out a bit more too. For starters, Todd fucking sucks! I hate this guy! Every scene he is in is an absolute tone killer. The way he talks, it's all just so awful. Sure, he's not in the movie for very long, but when he is, dear God, is he just insufferable. I get that he's supposed to be hated, but it's still really hard not to be annoyed by this asshole every second he's on screen. Jesus Christ. Sometimes the movie will insert a joke into a scene that doesn't really need it, and it really undermines the emotional weight of the scene. I'm mainly talking about the scene where the director confesses to murdering the queen herself and Nimona pretending to die. Sure, it's in character of her, but this was supposed to be a twist, and at that moment, I actually thought that was Ambrosius getting stabbed, and to see him act all goofy after being stabbed, it really took me out of the moment. Again, I know that was the point of the joke, but it just ended up giving me whiplash, and not in a good way. Speaking of the director, she is easily the weakest element of this movie. Mainly because she's not really much of a character, she actually reminds me a lot of Jenner from The Secret of Nim. Not in terms of personality, but more that they suffer from the exact same issue. In The Secret of Nim, Jenner was supposed to represent the fear of change and progression. He was perfectly content with what was already accomplished and believed that the rats had no reason to go to a new place and become self-sufficient. Later in the movie, Mrs. Brisby learned that Nim had learned about their location and was on their way to kill them all. But despite her warnings, Jenner wouldn't listen and even tried to silence her. Jenner was meant to represent just how destructive and antagonistic the fear of progression and change can be. And while it did serve the movie well, sadly, it came at a cost to his character. Can you name a single thing about Jenner's character outside of him wanting to rule over the rats? Well, I guess you could say he's vile, but it's honestly pretty one note. He's pretty one note as a whole, honestly. Really, the only difference between the director and Jenner is that one is obviously more over the top and ruthless, while the other is more sophisticated and graceful. Even in the moments when she does resort to violence, there's still this dignity to her that's pretty pronounced. But I'll ask you guys the same question I did with Jenner. Can you name a single thing about the director's character outside of her being afraid of the unknown? I mean, sure, she's dignified, like I said, and stuff, but it still just feels pretty one-note to me. In a movie that's full of character and fun personalities, the director just kind of stands there, not standing out in the slightest. Even Todd, as awful as he is, at least has a personality. I get what she's supposed to represent, but you can have an antagonist that can both represent the themes of the movie and be a fun character. Case in point, Death. Death is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Despite only being in The Last Wish for about 15 minutes, his presence is still felt throughout the entire film. Death is the literal embodiment of the main character's internal struggles and fears. Puss wants his lives back so he can remain the legend that is Puss in Boots. But how can he be the legend with only one life? And when Death is literally hiding behind every corner, waiting for you to make a mistake. But along with being the manifestation of the main character's fears, he's also got a personality of his own. He's cocky, resentful, he's a bit of a sociopath who loves to watch his victims suffer, he enjoys the thrill of the fight, he actually has a character that is beyond just the theme of the movie. Even at the end of the movie, he actually changes his mind about killing Puss because of the development that Puss himself went through. He sees that Puss no longer laughs in the face of death and is thus satisfied. Well, actually, he's super pissed pissed off, but my point still stands. He actively makes a choice to spare Puss's last life. Man, Death is pretty much the perfect antagonist. Like, it's honestly super stupid how perfect he is. But the director just feels more like an obstacle for the message of the film, and that's really it. Which, again, she works for what the film requires, but damn, given how everything else is handled in this movie, she herself just feels underdeveloped and simplistic. Maybe if they dove more into how she got those fears to begin with, then maybe I'd be invested in her fight to preserve the way things are. She brings up this dream that she kept having and stuff, but we don't get a flashback to it or a cool visual that adds on to it. Maybe just something like that to really help you feel for her. Honestly, I was more invested in Glorith and how she got her fear, and she was only in the movie for like 3 minutes. So yeah, Todd sucks, every once in a while a joke doesn't land, and the director is a pretty weak antagonist. But outside of that, you're in for a good-ass, funny, and thought-provoking ride. I said it already in this video, but I'm just gonna say it again. This movie is gay as fuck. Right to the point where it's become an integral part of the story. This isn't like your Onwards or your Rise of Skywalkers where you can just remove those scenes casually as you see fit. This is a whole other ballgame. Our main character is gay, he's in a relationship with a man, and throughout the entire film, they're forced to be at odds with each other. The movie explores both sides and how much it hurts both of them to have to fight each other. How Ambrosius is torn between his commitment to his job and to the man that he loves. There's this great scene that's at first played off as a joke about him ranting about his feelings before suddenly having this hard cut back to his silence. It was both funny and also kind of sad. Then there's a scene that played afterwards where Ballister is begging for him to believe in him, but instead, Ambrosius orders for his arrest. You can actually see the tears in Ambrosius' eyes as he's being forced to do this. Despite being apart for most of the movie still goes through great lengths to show just how much they really mean to each other. From small little gestures like they're flirting in the opening, to Ballister knowing that Ambrosius is allergic to olives. Little details like that go a long way and help their relationship feel very natural and believable. When Ambrosius says the words "I love you" in that one scene that Disney didn't want, you actually believe it. You can't just write them off as very good friends. They are madly in love and hate the fact that this is happening to them. Oh, but the movie doesn't stop being gay there. Absolutely not. The movie itself is entirely queer-coded. Ballister and Ambrosius are gay. Nimona herself is definitely a non-binary character. Every time Ballister asks her to be normal or be a girl, she replies, "I'm not a girl, I'm Nimona." There's this great scene where Nimona is supposedly giving her backstory to Ballister, only to cut it off by saying he's asking small-minded questions. Then later in the movie, when treating an arrow stuck in her leg, Belle asks what shapeshifting feels like, only to realize that it makes her uncomfortable. She didn't even have to say anything, you can just see it in her face. And what does Bal do?
Does it hurt, or does it... Sorry, small-minded question.
Scenes like this work simply because the chemistry between our main characters is so freaking good. The way they bounce off each other and learn about each other, the way they just naturally connect by having the same problem on the inside without really realizing it. Both are hated by society and deemed not worthy by societal standards, with Ballister not having noble blood and Nimona having her powers. There's an instant relation there from the beginning, but Ballister doesn't want to admit to it yet because A, he's innocent, which, fair enough, he is, but B, he's still too hung up on what society thinks of him. Becoming a knight and fighting monsters was always his dream, but in this society, only people of noble blood can become a knight. Oh, but then suddenly this new woke queen appears and says, hey, why can't he be a knight? What, just because he's not quote-unquote pure like the rest of you? He's got what it takes, I believe. In fact, why can't anyone become a knight? Why can't anyone follow their dreams and live their lives as they please? Well, my queen, the answer is very simple. Because they don't want them to. The movie is constantly asking the question, who is the real villain? and it does this by showing just how society reacts to something it doesn't fully understand. Now sure, we've seen this before in movies like Zootopia, but the way it's shown here feels way more real and believable. In Zootopia, it honestly doesn't really work as well as it intends because you can't really apply the whole racism message to animals that have to kill each other, as instinctually they have to survive. But in this movie, the hate and prejudice is way more real and way more believable. When the movie begins, we're shown how people feel about a quote-unquote impure person becoming a knight.
I don't feel safe. It's not what Glorith wanted.
The director knows about this prejudice and even has it herself, believing that allowing Ballister to become a knight will lead to the downfall of the entire kingdom. Already Ballister had it rough from the get-go because to society, he wasn't good enough from birth. But now after being framed, in the words of the movie, once they see you as a villain, that's all they'll ever see. Society is always looking for a villain to point the finger to, because it's simply too hard to look past the artificial stuff like skin and hair, where we come from, who we love. It is always easier to blame problems that are out of your depth on something else just because they're different. And why? Because it's easy. Because they're desperate. And because there's many of them. It was easy to frame Ballister because people were eager to be proven right, to have their fear justified. Ironically, it took someone else who was also eager to have their fear justified to make it happen, to lie about their own fears just to satisfy themselves. And it's that fear that made Nimona want to help Ballister in the first place. She wouldn't admit to it at first, and still took it personally when Ballister was afraid of her at first, despite the fact that she helped him escape prison, but deep down, Nimona had that fear as well.
Did you see the way that little girl looked at me? Kids. Little kids. They grow up believing that they can be a hero if they drive a sword into the heart of anything different.
I've been jumped on numerous occasions because of being gay, and I've had things shouted at us. And it is, in this day and age, it's disgusting.
And this homophobic hate crime is on the rise. In 2017 to 18, there were 11,592 recorded crimes in England and Wales. That number rose to more than 14,000 in the last year.
And I'm the monster?
We don't find out till right before the final climax, but it turns out Nimona is actually pretty old, at least 1,000 years old, and it turns out that she's, by the city's history, this great evil that was defeated by this warrior named Glorith. But wouldn't you believe it, it turns out the story isn't what we thought after all. I won't lie, I did kinda see this twist coming as I watched the movie. It wasn't really all that shocking that Nimona and Glorith were actually friends as kids, and it turns out that the story of her being a knight was greatly exaggerated as time went on. Like, almost to the point where it's kind of laughable how distorted it got over time. How the fuck did people look at a 6-year-old kid with a wooden sword and go, yep, she defeated a giant monster? It is a little ridiculous, admittedly, but honestly, I think they were going for more of an emotional feel rather than a logical one. Sometimes for a story to work, you kinda have to suspend your disbelief in some ways. If the emotion fits what's necessary for the story, then I think it's easier to get behind the writing. And given the climax of this movie, man, the emotion gets pretty heavy. As I said earlier in this video, this movie is very queer-coded, in that just about everything is an allegory that fits with queer people and how prejudiced that society has been and is to them. The movie serves as an allegory for how prejudice and hate can form a person's mental state, how a person's identity can be shaped by how society itself views you, whether it be your skin color, your religion, or in this movie's case, who you love, how you view yourself, whether you simply accepted the sex that you were at birth or decided a different path for yourself, or whether you simply reject those terms altogether. This is a story about identity, and given the timing of its release, we couldn't have gotten it at a better time. Not even 10 years ago, gays in America earned the right to finally marry the ones they love. And in this year, gays can now be legally discriminated against by businesses just for existing. Hey, didn't the Germans try this sort of thing out back in the 1930s and that really didn't end well? I'm just saying, it's crazy how much we keep going back and forth in this regard. Just when some progress seems to be made, something else has to happen to make things worse, to make it harder for these people to just be themselves and live happy lives. So a movie like Nimona, with the message it has and how it's being upfront and unapologetic with its representation, is a godsend. This is a movie that I think people need to see right now, as it's a perfect showcase of how the prejudice, fear, and hate that society will deliver onto somebody just for being different, and how that can destroy their own self-worth. Before you know it, it seems like everyone's against you. And for some people, that can just be too much to bear.
Got attacked from behind, got punched in the head, pushed to the floor.
I don't know what's scarier. The fact that everyone in this kingdom wants to run a sword through my heart.
What we've said in Florida is we are going to remain a refuge of sanity and a citadel of normalcy.
You see, Ralph was a homosexual, a person who demands an intimate relationship with members of their own sex.
We have to understand, barbarians need to be educated. They need to be disciplined.
Or that sometimes I just want to let them.
Homosexual behavior is harmful not only to society, but more importantly to the individuals who engage in that behavior.
You don't need to be in the pew every Sunday to
homosexual
know
lifestyle.
that there's something
What
wrong
we've
with
said
this
in
country.
Florida is
Gays
order.
and servants.
Not everyone gets the happily ever after that they were looking for. Maybe it's not that kind of kingdom. But maybe the story isn't over yet. Because by the end of the day, even if it feels like everyone's against you, even if it feels like it's better to just give up, there is always someone who will see you and remind you that you're not alone. Ballister starts the movie being just like everyone else. Fearful, asking short-minded questions, not accepting Nimona's help until he doesn't really have a choice. But as time goes on, and he sees just how much he's grown to care about her, and how much he really is like her, he learns to accept her as how she is.
No matter what we do, we can't change the way people see us.
You changed the way you see me.
Not as a girl or as normal, but as Nimona, who he finally sees for who she is. Nimona is a story about identity and how, despite society trying to form it for you, in the end, it's your story. And you decide where it goes from here. You get to decide who you want to be. We've seen this message before in animated movies, but for people of LGBTQ, they finally have a movie where that message applies to them directly. And I think that is a very special thing, especially with recent events. This movie coming back from the dead and becoming very successful is kind of a reflection of the message of the movie itself, that maybe the story isn't over yet. Everything about this movie ties into the message the same way movies like Encanto and The Last Wish did. Even the animation style, while simplistic, was made with the intention of lacking complex detail in exchange for focusing on who the characters are. The world they created around Nimona is very cool and creative, going for that blend of sci-fi fantasy. Like, you can tell, they just had a lot of fun making this cool medieval future. In the same world as flying cars and holograms, you still have swords and horses and machine gun bows and arrows. That's actually really cool. I like that. Where the animation lacks in textures, they make up for with great expressions and detail. Remember how weird and uncanny the characters in Boss Baby look like with their big eyes? Well, Nimona looked at Boss Baby and said, yeah, let's fix that. The designs for these characters are perfect. Not a single bad-looking character anywhere. The expressions are always on point, capturing the emotion of every moment perfectly. From the laughs, to the sorrow, to the pain. Given the production issues, I'm more than willing to give this movie some leeway in the animation. And besides, you don't technically need good animation to have a good animated movie. Just look at Lightyear. Yeah, I know, easy target, but still. Nimona still has a cool world with good lighting, great expressive characters, and tons of imagination. Honestly, I think I'm running short of things to say here, so I'm just gonna wrap things up now. It's a story we've seen before, but the way it handles its themes of identity, isolation, tolerance, prejudice, and overcoming one's own self-deprecating nature is still insanely strong and well developed. Again, it's insane just how good this movie turned out following everything that it went through. Hell, it's a miracle that it even exists to begin with. I'm really happy for Nate Stevenson, the cast and crew, and especially the people at Blue Sky who got to see their passion project that really would have been a game changer for them see the light of day in the end. I mean, seriously, how cool was it that they included an entire section for Blue Sky Studios in the end credits? They didn't have to do that, but it's dope to see them get the respect and credit that they deserve in the end. I really did love Nimona. It's definitely not perfect for all the reasons I listed earlier. The antagonist is kind of weak, not every joke lands as well as they expected, it can be fairly predictable at times, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm honestly not the biggest fan of the Spider-Man Homecoming ending shot we got. I kind of wish they did keep it in the air like the book did if Nimona lived or not, but I get it, it's a kid's movie, gotta give him a happy ending.
Hey, boss.
But despite its problems that are mostly pretty minor stuff, save for the director, they do not take away my enjoyment and appreciation for this film. Its humor, its animation, its characters, and its message all make this movie a must-watch in my opinion. And it's also the perfect high note for Blue Sky Studios to go out on. I've got some things to say. I should have said them when you were here, but despite my thoughts on some of your movies, I have nothing but respect for you. I hope you know that. You showed me that true talent can come from a squirrel, not a mouse. I'll miss... Ugh. Well, look at it this way. At least your memory is still being kept alive. Even if it is for the worst reasons. So, I guess that's some kind of compliment. And hey, if I end up reviewing it, then the hate won't go to you this time. Goodbye, Blue Sky Studios. I genuinely will miss you. Oh, and I know this is a bit late and all, but happy Pride Month, everybody. And you're welcome to be proud on my channel any time of the year.